impulses are being redirected. The poor and the underclass are growing. Their intention to rule rests with the annihilation of consciousness. We are focused only on our own gain. Please understand, they are safe as long as they are not discovered.
I sit on a council of 13 people that take orders only from the Rothschild Tribunal in London, which they claim they take their orders directly from Lucifer.
I was the manager of Zodiac Productions, which Zodiac Productions' name's been changed since then. I'm not even sure what they call it now, but it's the largest music conglomerate in the world. It owns RCA Records, Columbia Records, Motown Records, owns almost all the concert booking agencies in the United States. And that's not even the name of the company that owns it. The name of the company that owns it is Brenner Enterprises, and Brenner Enterprises is owned by Chase Manhattan. Chase Manhattan's owned by Standard Oil, and Standard Oil is owned by the Lords of London. You can track it on back. You kind of get the idea after a while. But I was the managing president of Zodiac Productions. It's one of my jobs, as being one of these 13 people. Thus, I got to know many of the people who produce music and sing the music and play the music that you play. Now, one of the closest friends that I got during that time that I obtained was a man named David Crosby. Crosby, Still, Nash and Young. I saw David the day before Christmas last year, talked with him. I got him away from this witch that he had with him. He told her to go shopping. We were in West Hollywood, and I was witnessing around to people I knew. We went off in this store, and we started talking. I said, David, I'd like to ask you a couple questions. I said, I already know the answers, but I've been gone for 5 years. I'd like to know if certain things are still the way they were when I left. I said, now I'll have to explain some of this when I'm done, because you're not going to understand it all unless you know something about music. I said, do they still take the master to the temple room? Dave said, yeah. I said, do they still have the coven conjure demons into the master? He said, of course. I said, now, I got to know something. What's the main reason for rock music? He said, come on, Lance, you know what the reason is. I said, please, David, I don't want to guess. Tell me what the main reason is. He says, the same as when you were in, so that we can play spells on people that we couldn't cast spells upon. I'll explain what that means in a minute. I said, okay, one last thing. I've been hearing that you must be an initiated witch now to get a record contract. He said, that's right. He says, many of us that weren't total witches have to be witches now in order to produce music.
Kiss openly bragged how they were gaining control of people through their music because the people played their music. They told how they didn't form their own group. Their church, because they were ordained ministers of the Satanist church, placed them together. And that's how most of the music is done.
I got to meet people like Sammy Davis and that kind of shit. Sammy told me he worshiped the devil. Sammy was like, you know, Satan is as powerful as God.
I wish that I had the time more on rock music, but believe me, it is the work carefully planned out in the occult world.
Will put truths, because that's what they tend to do. They always want to tell you what they're doing. They'll always tell you in one way or another what they're doing or how they're going to do it, because that's part of the contract as well. It's part of the thing. If they tell you what they're doing and you're not smart enough to pick it up, then they can get away with it karmically.
Why do some artists who have a certain amount of talent, some not very much, why do they get picked up by the corporations to become these big influencers of young people and other people through the entertainment and the music industry, and others with incredible talent never get off the ground? It's because they are chosen.
Most people still today think that all entertainment is therefore nothing more than entertainment. It never ever was that case.
What we see here is that this is actually all based up into psychological warfare done by military intelligence wrapped up with occultism.
Disney World looks like a whole fun bunch of rides, but what we actually have here are a number of rides that are sponsored by military industrial corporations.
Happiest place on earth, my snow white ass.
Walt Disney was hired by J. Edgar Hoover to instill mind pattern programming into the children. It was an FBI plan. It was instigated.
To really appreciate how this could be done, you need to appreciate something called trauma-based mind control. During the last war in the concentration camps of Germany, they started to affect the manipulation of a natural mechanism in the mind that shuts out trauma. If you could systematically traumatize someone and start with children, particularly before the age of 5 and 6, you could turn their minds into a honeycomb of self-contained compartments, none of which was aware of the other's existence.
Disney is used as a torture device to compartmentalize and bring about this dissociative identity disorder.
We've got these list of Mouseketeers. We've got Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Justin Timberlake.
These were all poor little children that were brainwashed together in a Disney program.
What they will do is use these people in high-profile rituals.
Let me tell you why you're here. You're here because you know something. What you know you can't explain, but you feel it. You felt it your entire life. But there's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind, driving you mad.
Let's be clear, I don't believe that they're really pulling energy and power into their phallus and energizing themselves to be God men. They believe it.
Actually, right now we should talk a little about Tom Cruise and Scientology.
Scientology, according to L. Ron Hubbard Jr., is a black ritual done over a long period of time. Instead of getting all your trauma at once, you get it in little increments.
This footage is worth money.
Why? What footage?
This thing you're looking into?
It's a camera.
Exactly.
Britney Spears created quite a commotion here at this tattoo parlor in Sherman Oaks tonight when she showed up, well, let's just say with a whole new look that may not be so popular with her fans.
They aren't just pop stars trying to cry out for attention. These are people that have been put through abuse throughout their lives and raised in this environment that we can't even imagine.
There is breaking news now on Fox News Channel. The Los Angeles Times and the Associated Press are now reporting Michael Jackson has died in Los Angeles this afternoon.
And of course, we know that the Jacksons were also ritually abused.
Really, it's a tragedy at the end of the day. That is the type of creature that his father produced.
You just said that you would practice the dance steps and your father would be holding a belt in his hand. Is that what you just said?
Yes. And he would tear you up if you missed.
I know what evil looks like, folks, and I'm telling you, that's an evil man. And the whole thing is an evil spectacle.
So I finally got my own TV show coming out next fall on CBS. It's a half-hour weekly show that I will host entitled Let's Hunt and Kill Billy Ray Cyrus. It's a fairly self-explanatory plot. Each week we let the hounds of hell loose and we chase that jarhead, no-talent, cracker asshole all over the globe. Until I finally catch that fruity little ponytail of his in the back, pull him to his knees, put a shotgun in his mouth like a big black cock of death.
That's how we sell sex to little girls. That's how we sell sex to little girls.
Good afternoon, Mr. President. I come to you today representing
families. The White House claims he's too busy to even acknowledge Sheen's letter, never mind meet with Sheen. But obviously he's not too busy to talk about some mindless antics of this hip-hop star jumping on stage at an MTV Music Awards show.
He's a jackass.
In fact, Obama routinely makes mindless comments about everything under the sun. And yet he can't even acknowledge questions that are shared by the 9/11 victims' family members that are put out in this letter by Charlie Sheen.
And I'm sick of this. I'm sick of this bloody morality. There was moral outrage in America. It's disgusting, Janet Jackson. Immoral. I wonder which of these pictures is more sodding immoral.
Welcome to the X Factor. Your final starts right here.
They've been programmed. And I'm sad because I know that it's hard for people like that to take a serious interest in world affairs. I see how easy it is for the masses to be manipulated.
It's a psychic weapon to blind people from all the majesty and beauty that is creation, and to blind people from their families and their children and just the amazing life force that's all around us.
The scale and fine detail in which these opinion formers right across society, from entertainment, media through to politics, etc., are actually brought through from childhood to do those things is absolutely incredible. And when the lid really comes off this, and it's coming off, then people are going to look at the world they've been living in and see just, even if people now think, yes, it's a controlled world, whoa, wait till you see the level of control.
We're standing up to the drama that they do bring. Just check the left hand, see the G-ring. That mock rituals, what are they unleashing? Masonic rituals, live on TV. It's all been exposed, like the toxic flow. Just like MK Ultra, it's all my control. You tripping when you ain't sipping, have a refill. You feeling like you in prison, huh? That's 'cause that's real.
The Matrix is everywhere. It is all around us. You can see it when you turn on your television. It is the world that has been pulled over your eyes to blind you from the truth.
Why do you believe what you believe? Because at some point in your life, you trusted the information that somebody was giving you. And that someone you trusted told you that a car was a car, a tree was a tree, a bird was a bird, the blue stuff above you is the sky. They have been programming us and programming you since you were little, and you don't even know it because you don't even question it.
Let me show in a parable to what extent our nature is enlightened or unenlightened. Envision human figures living in an underground cave with a long entrance across the whole width of the cave. Here they have been from their childhood and have their legs and necks chained so that they cannot move and can only see before them, being prevented by the chains from turning their heads around. Above and behind them, a fire is blazing at a distance. They see only their own shadows, which the fire throws on the opposite wall of the cave. For how could they see anything but the shadows if they were never allowed to move their heads? Between the fire and the prisoners, there is a raised way and a low wall built along the way like the screen which puppet players have in front of them, over which they show the puppets. Do you see men passing along the wall, carrying all sorts of articles which they hold projected above the wall? Statues of men and animals made of wood and stone and various materials? of the objects which are being carried in like manner, they would only see the shadows. And if they were able to converse with one another, would they not suppose that they were naming what was actually before them? And suppose further that there was an echo which came from the wall. Would they not be sure to think when one of the passers-by spoke that the voice came from the passing shadows? To them, the truth would be literally nothing but the shadows of the images. And now look again and see what will naturally follow if one of the prisoners is released. At first, when he is liberated and compelled suddenly to stand up and turn his head round and look towards the light, all this would hurt him, and he would be much too dazzled to see distinctly those things whose shadows he had seen before. And then conceive someone saying to him that what he saw before was an illusion. But that now, when he's approaching nearer to reality and his eyes turn toward more real existence, he has a clearer vision. What will be his reply? And you may further imagine that his instructor is pointing to the objects as they pass and requiring him to name them. Will he not be perplexed? Will he not think that the shadows which he formerly saw are truer than the objects which are now shown to him? And suppose once more that he is reluctantly dragged up a steep and rugged ascent and held fast until he is forced into the presence of the sun himself. When he approaches the light, his eyes will be dazzled, and he will not be able to see anything at all of what are now called realities. He will require to grow accustomed to the sight of the upper world. And first he will see the shadows best. Next, the reflections of objects in the water, and then the objects themselves. Then he will gaze upon the stars and the spangled heavens, and the light of the moon. He will see the sky and the stars by night. Last of all, he will be able to see the sun, and not mere reflections of it in the water, but he will see the sun in its own proper place, and not in another. And he will contemplate the sun as it is. Will he not then proceed to argue that it is the sun who gives the season and the years, and is the guardian of all that is in the visible world, and in a certain way the cause of all things which his fellows have been accustomed to behold? Clearly he would first see the sun, and then reason about it. And when he remembered his old habitation and what was the wisdom of the cave and his fellow prisoners, do you not suppose that he would bless himself for the change and pity them? And if they were in the habit of conferring honors among themselves on those who were the quickest to observe the passing shadows, and to remark which of them went before and which followed after, and which were together and who were therefore best able to draw conclusions as to the future, do you think that he would care for such honors and glories, or envy the possessors of them? Would he not say with Homer, "Better to be the poor servant of a poor master, and to endure anything rather than think as they do and live after their manner"? Imagine once more such a one coming suddenly out of the sun to be replaced in his old situation. Would he not be certain to have his eyes full of darkness? And if there were a contest of measuring the shadows, and he had to compete with the prisoners who had never moved out of the den, while his sight was still weak, and before his eyes had become steady, wouldn't they all laugh at him and say he had spoiled his eyesight by going up there? And that it was better not to even think of ascending? And if anyone tried to release another and lead him up to the light, let them only catch the offender, and they would put him to death. It is the task of the enlightened not only to ascend to learning and to see the good, but to be willing to descend again to those prisoners and to share their troubles and their honors, whether they are worth having or not. And this they must do, even with the prospect of death. They shall give of their help to one another, wherever each class is able to help the community.
A lot of people here tonight felt like they lost. You know why? Because y'all been lied to. Google lied to you. Google. Facebook lied to you. Radio lied to you.
The powerful people that be, whether it's the music industry or the movie industry, you are only allowed a certain level of success if you are willing to join their club, if you're willing to be part of their secret society, or if you're compromised. They will not let someone obtain a lot of fame and power if they can't control you.
Let's talk about what's real.
I became a Freemason because I was obsessed with understanding what death was at a very young age.
So how are you going to live your life in the time that you're here?
If you are going to know yourself, then you've got to ask these questions.
The fundamental message of Masonry is man's pursuit of communion with his Creator.
It was very much this out-of-body experience.
I learned secrecy of the inner self.
It's a time outside of time. You're in another world.
The principles of Freemasonry are eternal.
Just out of curiosity, does anyone here not know who Aleister Crowley is? Never heard of Aleister? Okay. Anyone else? Anyone know his work really well, so well that you wouldn't admit it in public?
Aleister Crowley.
Aleister Crowley.
Aleister Crowley.
Aleister Crowley, the late Aleister Crowley, my very good friend.
This is Edward Alexander Crowley, also known as Aleister Crowley. He styled himself the wickedest man in the world.
The wickedest man in the world.
The wickedest man in the world.
The wickedest man in the world by the London newspapers.
The man who called himself the Beast 666.
The Golden Dawn's most notorious member was a self-confessed Satanist.
Others have affectionately dubbed him the most notorious occult magician of the 20th century.
Mr. Crowley has been instrumental throughout music.
Just the Crowleyism of, the times. It was a significant part of that middle point of the 70s.
Crowley was one of the pantheon of cult figures portrayed on the cover of the Beatles record, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band.
I can't think of any other occultist who's been more influential on rock musicians than Aleister Crowley, no one close.
And he personally bragged of having slaughtered 150 male children in 1 year. This is why he was called the wickedest man in the world.
And through putting himself in deep hypnotic trances and the use of drugs on himself, he wanted to become the most powerful being in the world.
He was responsible for founding the religion and philosophy of sexual magic, Thelema, in which role he identified himself as the prophet entrusted with guiding humanity into the Aeon of Horus in the early 20th century.
He is a Freemason,
It has its roots in Freemasonry and secret societies, which is essentially Luciferian doctrine. That is the sigil of Baphomet, the symbol of Baphomet.
I have found that at the very heart and core of all these secret societies lurks the Kabbalah.
A lot of the Kabbalah, a lot of ancient Egyptian deity as well.
In the Great Pyramid, Crowley conducted an occult ritual intending to access supernatural powers.
Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Love is the law. Love under will.
Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, and love is the law, love under will.
Do what thou wilt.
Do what thou wilt.
Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
Love is the law. Love is the only law.
I'm me. I'm doing what I want to do.
I am who I am, and it's tattooed on my chest.
Well, I've been an admirer of Aleister Crowley. I think that I'm carrying on much of the work that he started over 100 years ago, and I think the 60s themselves. You know, Crowley said, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law.
He heard that there were secret societies whose members practiced dark and forbidden rituals. Crowley was intrigued and was desperate to access this hidden world. After 2 years of searching, he finally found what he was looking for.
And in his study of religion and philosophy, he encountered this idea of an invisible college, a place where spiritual topics, where mysticism and magic are taught to people who can locate the entrance to this mystical college. And he very much wanted to be part of that. And eventually he did find someone who was able to provide him an introduction to a group called the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn.
He discovers the Golden Dawn. It's from here on, really, that he feels he's really onto something. This is something brand new. It's fresh. Bram Stoker is involved. Yeats is involved. The sort of literary sort of society lot. He wants to be part of that as well.
You're a crazy lady, I'd say.
Emerging from the mid-1960s folk revival, Sandy Denny represents one of the most important female singer-songwriters to have graced British music. During an eclectic career spanning 2 decades, her energy and creativity helped to revolutionise British folk music, while the breadth of her talent contributed a body of work that transcended traditional and generic sensibilities.
She is still the only ever guest vocalist on the Led Zeppelin album, you know, one of the most successful British bands ever. She's the only ever featured vocalist, and yet probably 99 people out of 100 wouldn't know that.
And time will tell us of lying, took her bow, and then she turned to go. Oh well, the night is long, the beats of time pass slow. Tired eyes on the sunrise, waiting for the eastern glow. The drums will shake, the castle wall, the ring raised her eye in black. With flames from the dragon of darkness, the sunlight blinds his eyes. War is the cry, pick up his swords and the sky is filled with good and bad. Mortals never know.
She is still the only ever guest vocalist on the Led Zeppelin album, you know, one of the most successful British bands ever. She's the only ever featured vocalist.
But what had happened is that Crowley worked through the different levels really quickly. He was a quick study, he was bright. I mean, he was a brilliant guy.
Like nobody else has gone through them before. He seems to take to this literally like a fish to water. This seems to be his vocation.
This is after his initiation into the Golden Dawn, which happened at Mark Mason's Hall, I believe November 18th, 1898. And he took the magical name of Frater Perdurabo, I will endure to the end.
He clashed with the poet W.B. Yeats, who was a prominent member, calling him a lank, disheveled demonologist.
Rumors of the questionable occult activities in Chancery Lane were filtering back to the other eminent members of the Golden Dawn, as well as whisperings of Crowley's many promiscuous sexual relationships with both men and women. William Yeats, for one, highly disapproved of the man and let it be known to Mathers. In May 1899, Crowley went to Paris to meet the leader of the Golden Dawn for the first time.
And the reason why Mathers was the guy was that he was in touch with these entities that were known as the secret chiefs. Now, if you know Madame Blavatsky, she talks about the Mahatmas. These are these kind of elevated, highly evolved individuals who have mastered, occult powers and masters the powers of mind and all that kind of thing, and they can communicate telepathically, they can materialize and do, they kind of, they can use the Force, put it basically, to be able to do that. Mathers claimed to be directly in touch with them.
As well as being a master Freemason, Mathers had spent many years translating one of the oldest and most famous books on magic, The Key of Solomon. He had also written a book, The Kabbalah Revealed, which he had translated from the Jewish Zohar.
Many years ago, I discovered another Hebrew manuscript, the book of the sacred magic of Abramelin the Mage. It was a kind of teach yourself guide on how to impose your will on nature, using contemplation, prayer, and abstinence. Not that far away from yoga. There are two schools of magic. On the one hand, you have white magic, which invokes the forces of good. On the other hand, you have black magic, which invoke the forces of evil. Abramelin teaches that the good forces are superior in power to the evil or satanic forces, and that by prayer and leading a pure life, the practicing magician can call upon his guardian angel to help him use and harness the forces of the power of darkness. There are no real rituals, just lists of angels and demons which can be evoked.
Now, Abramelin magic was something that had come into the Western literature in the 15th century. It was transmitted by Abram the Jew to his son Lamech to invoke the good forces, the angelic forces, in order to overcome the dark forces.
Crowley's so dedicated to performing the Abramelin ritual that he actually goes to the length of seeking out and finding the perfect place and buying a house to do the actual ritual in. Nothing else, just actually to do this ritual. And it's in Loch Ness, Boleskine House.
He had to have an isolated house that was indicated. And it had to have a terrace, kind of a flat area outside, and it had to be without nosy neighbors. I don't know how he heard about Boleskine, but he must have been attracted to the name because it's actually derived from Baal, the bloody god of the Babylonians.
He spent almost a year looking for this type of house. It had to be a house which opened onto the north, doors opening onto the north, with a terrace which he could cover with fine river sand, and with a part of the house where the spirits, which he called that, would congregate.
So Crowley dropped the ceremony, which was, you're not supposed to do this. I mean, once you begin something, you should follow through.
If you do that kind of thing, you get possessed, in a certain sense. Things get inside you and use you for their purposes.
When Celia comes, 'tis earthquake's hour. The bed vibrates like kettle drums. It is a grand display of power when Celia comes. When Celia farts, my hasty nose sniffs up the fragrance of her parts. Shamed are the violets and the rose when Celia farts.
Your lifetimes from lewd little girl to mature, worn whore that has chewed your own pile of manure. Your hand was the key to, and now you frig me too. Rub all the much of your cunt on me, Leia. Cunt, let me suck all your glued gonorrhea. Cunt without end, amen till you spend. Cunt, you have harbored all dirt and disease in your slimy and barbered loose hole with its cheese and its monthlies and pox, you chewer of cocks.
I rave, and I rape, and I rip, and I rend, everlasting world without end. Mannequin, maiden, maenad, man, in the might of Pan, Eopan, Eopan, Pan, Eopan.
If you dig into the poetry and you read between the lines of his poetry and, you dig into his story, a lot of the things will, make more sense to you. You know what I'm saying?
Sprawl on me, sit on my mouth, Leia, shit on me, slut, creamy the curds that drip from your gut. Greasy the turds, dribble your dung on the tip of my tongue. Churn on me, Leia, twist with your thighs, smear diarrhea into my eyes. Sputter out shit from the bottomless pit. Turn to me, chew it with me, Leia whore. Vomit it, spew it, and lick it once more. And can make lust drunk on disgust.
Crowley and I were performing and experimenting with magic ceremonies, calling upon demons and consecrating various talismans. Our experimentation into the occult went far beyond Crowley's formal Golden Dawn grades, incorporating the use of mind-altering drugs, opium, cocaine, and hashish.
God Harpocrates, by your deep purple darkness, by my white and brilliant light, do I conjure thee. Collect yourself about me. Clothe this astral form with a shroud of darkness.
Back in England, Crowley found his first disciple, Victor Neuburg, a young Cambridge poet.
In the case of Neuburg, there was definitely a peculiar kind of homosexual relation, and I'm not just now talking about the ordinary physical thing. Neuburg was in love with him. That's what I mean. He got mixed up with Crowley. Crowley saw there a far weaker character, plunged on Neuburg, and of course dragged him into this whole business of black magic.
The two set off to Algeria to perform Enochian magic, a dark and dangerous set of occult rituals. They walked deep into the Sahara for 2 days until they reached the point of exhaustion. Disorientated by the effects of the desert and copious quantities of hashish and mescaline, Crowley and Neuburg embarked on the climax of the ritual, summoning Choronzon, the dweller of the abyss, seen within the occult world as the devil himself.
snake? See the serpent appear? That is 10 feet long and 5 feet wide. He has one red eye and one green eye.
That's all right. He gets better.
He's 7 miles long. Deadly. See it? All of the history of the world is on its scales. It's big. It's moving. Devouring consciousness. Digesting power. A monster of energy. It's a monster. Kiss the snake on the tongue. Kiss the serpent. But if it senses fear, it'll eat us instantly. But if we kiss it without fear, it'll take us through the garden, through the gate, to the other side. Ride the snake till the end of time. Promise you, I'll be with you to the end of time. Nothing will destroy our circle. Ride the snake. Come on, come on. My wild love went riding. She rode all the day. She rode to the devil. Asked him to pay. My wild love went riding. She went to the sea. She went to the devil. My wild love went riding. She went to the sea. She went to the devil.
I sit on a council of 13 people that take orders only from the Rothschild Tribunal in London, which they claim they take their orders directly from Lucifer.
Promise you, I'll be with you to the end of time. Nothing will destroy our circle. Ride the snake.
Crowley has like a mystic revelation. He sees a blinding white light. He seems to commune with the secret chiefs, and he suddenly realises that sex can be a sacrament, can be in praise of the gods. It's like a shortcut. It's a short circuit to go straight in to achieve whatever you want to achieve magically.
The effect of the rituals left Neuberg a shattered man. He never fully recovered from the experience. But for Crowley, this was the final piece in the jigsaw. He had now united his belief in the power of sex and magic into one occult vision.
Crowley was practicing sexuality as a spiritual path. He reduced a great deal of symbolic teachings to their essence, which is essentially the duality or the polarity between male and female. And he experimented greatly within that sphere to understand what mysteries were contained within the sexual act.
the shock of family and friends, Crowley and Rose ran off and got married.
In 1904, Crowley was traveling with his wife Rose. He had just married and they were on a honeymoon. So Crowley's idea of a honeymoon was basically going around the world, a very long trip.
They were staying in Cairo, where they lived a lavish and decadent lifestyle.
To see what a great magician I was. We went accordingly after dinner with candles. I had with me a small notebook in which was written the preliminary invocation of the Goetia.
Thee I invoke, the Bournless One, thee that didst create the earth and the heavens, thee that didst create the night and the day, thee that didst create the darkness and the light. Thou art a sun, never, whom no man hath seen at any time. Thou art Yahweh, thou art Apophras. Thou hast distinguished between the just and the unjust.
Back in Cairo, they were continuing their orgy of hedonistic excess when the black magic ritual in the Great Pyramid had an unexpected result that was to be the turning point in Crowley's life.
Rose Kelly began mumbling and muttering about the gods wanting to talk to Crowley, and particularly the god Horus had something to say to him. At first, Crowley didn't know what to make of this, so he kind of ignored it. But eventually, she kept doing this and it continued, so he challenged her and he asked her some questions. And much to his surprise, this unschooled woman, she had never studied Egyptian mythology or religion or magic, in this trance state, was able to answer all of his questions correctly. So impressed with this, Crowley thought, okay, this seems to be some evidence that there is some divine hand at work here.
And after that, getting in touch with somebody that said they were the god Horus, I think at that point, something happened within his life. He opened himself up to a power that never ever left him, which he developed. And I believe he was the real thing. I believe that people that came into contact with him came into contact with that which was supernaturally evil. He had given himself under that demonic control, and that demonic control could now affect him and could work through him.
I shall find you, I shall have you, I am coming back to you.
Crowley heard an unearthly voice from over his left shoulder. For 1 hour, at precisely the same time over the next 3 days, Crowley said that the voice dictated to him the book of the law, the work that would become the Bible of his new religion.
In 1904, Crowley had a communication with an extraterrestrial being named Iwas. And this being, through his wife, kind of a channeling type operation, brought forth a book that was called the Book of the Law in 1904. And this book declared that the slain and risen God, i.e. Jesus, had stepped off the throne, and that a new God, the crowned and conquering child, was taking his place.
The Book of the Law is the Bible of the religion Crowley was endeavoring to found. A book of inspired writings, whereby Crowley portrays himself as a medium for some higher force. Inevitably, with an egomaniac like Crowley, he finds himself cast in the central role.
The Book of the Law states, "Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law." In other words, people have the right to determine exactly how to live their lives, regardless of moral and religious boundaries.
The focus is to help practitioners engage in spiritual quests that enable them to break through those restrictions so that he or she can be of one mind with his higher self. Crowley taught that the way to communicate with one's personal demon was to reach higher states of mind, trances that could not be easily achieved. And the best way to reach those special trance states, to be able to converse with one's demon, was through forms of ritual sex magic.
I found my experiences on pure DMT, both of them, utterly terrifying. And if I try to pin down what the terror came from, I'm not absolutely sure what it was. It was the strangeness and the purposive nature of the realm, that I had been put into a space where something was going to be done to me. And I think I wanted out, and at the same time, I couldn't get out.
Are you aware of the theories of human neurotransmitters being pathways to other dimensions, like dimethyltryptamine? Do you know about all that?
I mean, I know about DMT.
Do you know it's produced in the pineal gland? Going on, the seat of the soul, what the Egyptians called the Eye of Horus. And the Egyptians called the Eye of Horus, and the reason why the Catholics and so many ancient religions were so focused on pine cones in their art and their imagery, that's the pineal gland. That's the image of it. That's what it's supposed to represent. And for people who have had these intense transformative psychedelic experiences by consuming exogenous dimethyltryptamine, which is produced by the brain, that you have these insane transformative experiences where you feel like you are traveling to other dimensions.
The Bible tells us that there are three heavens, the first being earth, the second the devil's realm, and the third the kingdom of God. Satan and his fallen angels were casted out of this third heaven and are trapped in the second one. We know this because God says the devil will come to earth only after the rapture occurs. Until then, he is spiritually trying to deceive us all, and the elite are the ones taking part of this by false worshiping him, set in place by the devil himself. They believe that they are accessing high levels of consciousness in order to connect with this third realm and understand so many questions that we have as human beings as to why we are here and what comes after. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. The Egyptian Book of the Dead speaks on psychedelic medicine and hypnosis ritualistic techniques that were done to people in their experiences. This brings me back to the MKUltra experiment that was done by the CIA. Could Egypt be the origin to these practices? What leads me to believe that these Egyptians accessed these realms through these drugs and deceived the masses of people below them is the stories told by people who have dipped into it today. It is no coincidence that they have seen the same blue beings as well as the deceptive serpents that have been carved by the Egyptians.
Different beings. Someone looked like they were from the movie Avatar.
A half person, half snake-like being
blue, you know, and so the overall feeling I remember was just feeling like completely entranced and like seduced by this energy.
It was almost a feeling of terror and claustrophobia combined with that. I was thrashing around. I wanted out of there, but I couldn't go.
That experience sort of, it was different from any other DMT experience that I had. Like, when I smoked it, I felt like I got abducted right at that moment. Like aliens sort of, you know, waited for me to smoke my bowl and then they abducted me.
The entities you see on DMT, are they real or not? Tall order, very difficult to really unpack that. For one thing, what do you mean by real? Right. Let's start there.
Sure.
Again, I don't know. Let's say it's not real. In a Carl Jung way, it's a shared human archetype. What is that programming that you take DMT that you release a little bit of during deep sleep, during vivid dreams, and a ton of when you die?
When he first left the body and had a near-death experience himself, he went into a realm that was classically the realm of the demons and the what I would call the archons and the
Satan and his fallen angels were casted out of this third heaven and are trapped in the second one.
He went into a realm that was classically the realm of the demons and the what I would call the archons and the reptilian entities and all this stuff. In fact, he talks about seeing reptilian beings brushing against him and all that stuff.
I go through the tunnel, going through a tunnel, and I see a hand and it like stops me. And I see the fingers mutating, it turns into like 3 fingers, and then it starts backing out. And then it's the Bahamut, like the Satan figure with the goat.
Now, of course, many scientists would say this is just brain candy. This is just an illusion of your own brain, disturbed brain chemistry. I don't agree with those scientists. I can't.
Like, it's occurred to me over the years that what we call imagination might simply be a hyperdimensional perception, and you're actually seeing worlds and places that truly exist somewhere scattered through the galaxies like grains of sand.
All the history of the world is on its scales.
Somewhere scattered through the galaxies like grains of sand.
You know, in the Amazon, they believe that there is an intelligent spirit that lies behind ayahuasca. They don't think they're dealing with just plants, and who are we to say they're wrong? The shamans believe that an intelligent entity, a spirit being, lies behind the ayahuasca beverage.
And he's like, well, Alex, I just don't believe in demons, but I did see basically aliens come up to the edge of the forest, and we were all seeing it, and we were all seeing the same thing, but I think it was a chemical reaction. You don't have everybody gets drunk, we all think about what happened to us in high school or college or what's good or what's bad. We all have different experiences. When you're taking an hallucinogen, and suddenly you're all seeing the same thing, it just means that the filter is off.
Bringing his mistresses home, he would sexually and sadistically abuse them, whilst I would be forced to watch. On occasion, they would be in our bed, whilst I would be hung by my ankles in the closet.
My desire is to help people. One extremely common example of that in our contemporary culture in the Western world is Freemasonry. Because a person who becomes a Mason makes a covenant with those who are Masons. Freemasons will tell you that it's secret, but it's not. In the 1950s, a book was published in Britain by an Anglican clergyman named Hannah called Darkness Visible, which sets out all the main rites and ceremonies of Freemasonry, and no Mason has ever challenged that book in more than 30 years. And when you become a Mason, you have to pronounce a curse on yourself if you disclose the secrets of the Masons.
And what happened was, a gentleman came knocking at his door after he published a book. And in this book, it was a book of poetry, and in the book he had made an allusion to something. And this guy, his name was Theodore Royce. He was a German occultist and the head of the OTO, the Ordo Templi Orientis, which stands for the Order of Eastern Templars. There's the Knights Templar again. And this Theodore Royce told Crowley that he had given away the greatest secret in occult history. So the guy promptly initiated him on the spot to the 9th degree of the OTO and then explained the secret to him.
...1997 yılı Türkiye Masonları açısından çok önemli bir yıl olmuştu. İlk defa Mason mabetlerinde gizli çekimler gerçekleştirilmiş ve bu görüntüler Kanal 7 televizyonunda günlerce yayınlanmıştı. İki ayrı locada çekilmiş olan gizli kamera görüntüleri hem Türk halkını hem de yüksek derecelere ulaşmamış masonları şoke etti. 1738 yılında İstanbul'da kurulan ilk locadan bu yana gizliliğini koruyarak gelen masonların görüntülerinin deşifre edilmesi ve masonluğun gerçek yüzünün gözler önüne serilmesi günlerce konuşuldu. Adayları tanıdınız.
Serdar Büyüküstün, mesleği elektrik mühendisi. Aykut Erensoy, mesleği elektrik mühendisi. Kenan Ali Akman, mesleği serbest ticaret.
Adayların kimlikleri anlaşıldı. Onları içeri aldınız.
Please, come forward.
Sayın baylar, her şeyden önce bize söz vermenizi istiyoruz. Aramıza alınmanız kabul edilse de edilmese de bizim düşünce odası dediğimiz o karanlık bölgeye girdiğiniz andan başlayarak şu ana kadar görüp işittiklerinizi ve bundan böyle burada işiteceklerinizi, gözleriniz açıldıktan sonra da göreceklerinizi hiç kimseye söylemeyeceğinize namusunuz ve onurunuz üzerine söz verir misiniz? Sayın Aykut Erensoy?
Evet, söz veririm.
Sayın Serdar Büyüküstün?
Söz veririm.
Sayın Kenan Ali Akman?
Evet, söz veririm.
Soruşturucu kardeşim, adayları oturtunuz. Sayın Serdar Büyüküstün, göğsünüze dayanan ve bir elinizle size yoklatılan şeyin ne olduğunu söyler misiniz?
Metal bir parça. Kılıç.
Sayın Aykut Erensoy, göğsünüze dayanan ve bir elinizle size yoklatılan şeyin ne olduğunu söyler misiniz?
Kılıca benziyor.
Kılıcın göğüslerinize dayandırılması, verdiğiniz sözde durmazsanız yaşamınız boyunca pişmanlık duyacağınızı ve acı çekeceğinizi.
And it includes things like having your tongue cut out, your right arm cut off and thrown over your left shoulder, and your body being exposed in a tight place where the tides rise and fall twice in every 24 hours. Those are self-imposed curses.
So the guy promptly initiated him on the spot to the 9th degree of the OTO and then explained the secret to him. The secret is that as a Mason, you are promised immortality. If you go to a Masonic funeral, you will hear them discuss the immortality issue. You will hear them promise that they will go to the celestial lodge above and live there forever. Where do they get their promise of immortality? Simply, the secret that Crowley uncovered, probably through demonic intervention, is the secret that this immortality is conveyed through tantric sex magic.
Good evening. Password, sir? Fidelity. Thank you, sir.
Crowley uncovered, probably through demonic intervention, is the secret that this immortality is conveyed through tantric sex magic.
Whereas for ceremonial magic you need what is called a temple, so a space, a place where you do that. In sexual magic, the temple is your own body. And you use your own body in a way that it gives you access to these dimensions, to these other dimensions of reality, which are basically the goal of the practice of magic.
Crowley found so much value and appeal to this that his practice kind of shifted very much to focus on that for the rest of his life.
In 1912, Royce initiated Crowley into 3 further degrees of OTO proper, that is the 8th, 9th, and 10th degrees, making him Grand Master of a new English section.
He now had an excuse for using sexual magic and the introduction of bodily fluids to enhance magical power.
Kesha admits to drinking her own pee. Yeah, you heard me right. The glitter queen herself fully admitted to drinking her own urine during a recent interview with BBC One. She said it's, quote, all the things you would want to see and all the things you wouldn't really want to see. Making out with dudes, drinking my own pee, jumping out of a building, jumping out of airplanes, swimming with sharks. But it isn't the first time the former waitress has shocked us. You might remember Kesha drinking blood from a human heart on stage in Australia last year, or that time she wore an outfit entirely made of human teeth.
They say that you sell yourself to the devil. That's literally what you do. Literally, it's not even a figure of speech here. That's what you do. Is you sell yourself to the shaitan. Do what you want, or ask me to do what you want, and I will then, obey you. What is the motivation of the magician? Money, and maybe even fame, but money. They have to humiliate themselves in front of the jinn. Sit at 3 a.m. facing such a direction in the middle of a pentagon, and you draw it out, and you will have this color light, and you will have this and that. So these are signals being given to the jinn world that I'm willing to enter.
Nancy Jenkinson.
Okay.
She was hired by Kim and her husband Kanye to look after their daughter Northwest, but was apparently fired by the household after just 6 months. Now, she also said that she regularly witnessed Kim drinking blood and consuming various human body parts as she worshipped Satan.
If they even insinuate that they're going to reveal some of these things, they're done.
A lot of people here tonight felt like they lost. You know why? Because y'all been lied to. Google lied to you. Google. Facebook lied to you. Radio lied to you.
And if they even insinuate that they're going to reveal some of these things, they're done.
What idea was it for DMX to be in a tub full of blood for that second album cover?
I don't know. Probably Leo. I think he had something to do with that blood thing, man. It was pretty funny. It was goat blood, I think. Yeah.
Oh, it was actual blood. It wasn't just like food coloring.
Yeah, that was the real deal.
Gonna let it all hang out. Wanna make some noise, really raise my voice. Yeah, I wanna scream and shout. No inhibitions, make no conditions. Get a little out of line. I ain't gonna act politically correct. I only wanna have a good time.
Shades of old Lucretia Borgia, there's a devil in you tonight. And although my heart adores you, my head says it ain't right. That sly come hither stare, that strips my conscience bare, it's witchcraft. And I've got no defense for it. The heat is too intense for it. What good would common sense for it do? 'Cause it's witchcraft, wicked witchcraft. And although I know it's strictly taboo, when you arouse the need in me, my heart says yes indeed in me. Proceed with what you're leading me to. It's such an ancient pitch, but one I wouldn't switch. 'Cause there's no nicer witch than you. such an ancient pitch, but one that I'd never switch, 'cause there's no nicer witch than you. My heart says yes indeed to me when you arouse the need in me, 'cause there's no nicer witch than you.
The entire symbolism, not only of Freemasonry, but of many other traditions, blazed upon my spiritual vision. From that moment, the OTO assumed significant importance. I had found the vehicle for my new eon.
For perfume mix meal and honey, and thick leavings of red wine, then oil of abramelin and olive oil, and afterward soften and smooth down with rich, fresh blood. The best blood is of the moon monthly, then the fresh blood of a child, or droppings from the host of heaven, then of enemies, then of the priest or of the worshippers, last of some beast, no matter what. This burn, of this make cakes and eat unto me. This hath also another use. Let it be laid before me, and kept thick with perfumes of your orison. It shall become full of beetles, as it were, and creeping things sacred unto me. These shall breed lust and power of lust in you, at the eating thereof. Ra-Ho-Ku is with thee. Worship me with fire and blood. Worship me with swords and with spears. Let the woman be girt with a sword before me. Let blood flow to my name. Trample down the heathen. Be upon them. O warrior, I will give you of their flesh to eat. Sacrifice cattle, little and big, after a child. Ye shall see that hour, O blessed beast, and thou the scarlet concubine of his desire. Damn them who pity. Kill and torture, spare not, be upon them. That stele they shall call the abomination of desolation.
Now, according to Crowley's diary, he would have mass, and he would make cakes filled with menstrual blood. But he said in his mass, the host was made of excrement. So magically speaking, blood and semen, blood and excrement attract spirits, and semen or sperm keeps them alive.
When you get deep enough into the occult and you start joining secret societies, you basically eventually have to eat shit, and you have to drink piss and bathe in blood and all types of just sick, degenerate behavior.
What are we talking about here? There's a considerable overlap in the United States from the various groups, organizations, individuals, whatever you want to call it. But the Satanists today, and for the number of years in the past, have basically used his philosophy and his writings as a guide.
Francisco Fuster of Miami, Florida, is convicted on 14 counts of child abuse. This case involved Francisco, his wife, and more than 50 children. The children related stories of being forced to eat feces, pose for pornographic pictures, take mind-altering drugs, kill animals, and submit to anal rape with a crucifix. The children also described the chanting of prayers to Satan. In 1988, 23-year-old Kelly Michaels was convicted of 115 counts of sexual abuse against 20 children in her care at the We Care Nursery School in Maplewood, New Jersey. The accusations included Kelly forcing the children to have sex with her and lick peanut butter off of her genitals, penetrating their rectums and vaginas with knives and forks, and forcing them to eat feces and urine. The tales of satanic ritual abuse usually start with touching or fondling, then progress to oral, genital, and anal penetrations, forced injections of mind-altering drugs, monsters or witches enacting bizarre rituals that include defecating and urinating on their victims' heads and forcing them to eat feces and drink blood and urine, and finally torture, mutilation, and murder. The rituals were almost always filmed. The victims were forced to participate in the murders and often made to eat the flesh and drink the blood of those who had been sacrificed. These were not merely the sadistic acts of pedophiles, but the sophisticated techniques by which devil-worshipping perpetrators programmed and controlled victims.
And now listen to this sentence, folks, closely. For the highest spiritual working, one must accordingly choose that victim which contains the greatest and purest force. A male child of perfect innocence and high intelligence is the most satisfactory and suitable system. We're talking about human sacrifices.
Cunt, you have sucked, you pricks. You squirted out fetuses, fucked till bastards, you blurted out into space.
Beat it up, nigga, catch a charge. Extra large and extra hard. Put this pussy right in your face. Swipe your nose like a credit card. What is inside? Spit in my mouth, look in my eyes. This pussy is wet, come take a dive.
Gobble me, swallow me, drip down inside of me. Quick jump out for you, let it get inside of me.
I don't wanna spit, I wanna go, I wanna gag, I wanna choke. I want you to touch that little dangly thing that's swinging the back of my throat. Yeah, you fucking with some wet ass pussy. Bring a bucket and a mop for this wet ass pussy.
Cunt, you have sucked, you pricks. You squirted out fetuses, fucked till bastards, you blurted out into space. Bend on my face.
I dedicate myself wholly to the great work. I will work for wickedness. I will kill my heart. I will be shameless before all men. I will freely prostitute my body to all creatures.
Our daughter Poopy was born in Paris in February 1920. We moved to the Abbey shortly after. We signed the lease for the Abbey in joint names. He was Sir Aleister Crowley, and I, the Countess Leah Harcourt. Each morning we would put on our magical robes and take our magical weapons outside. He with his sword or dagger, and the women with their chalice. We would all face east and recite a short prayer, the Kabbalistic cross. Then at noon, in the evening, and at midnight, we would go outside and make our prayers to the sun. Most evenings we would perform acts of sex magic, usually between the three of us, sometimes with other assistants which Aleister had found on the streets of Cephalou, or were visiting the Abbey. He was also taking heroin by then.
It's quite a climb up this hill, but if you're feeling brave, around the other side of the big mountain and just next to the stadium is the house of the man who the English press called the wickedest man in the world. It's really creepy, actually. A bit like Scientology. In fact, I think L. Ron Hubbard was inspired by him. He was certainly his friend anyway. And he's said to have inspired Aldous Huxley, David Bowie, the Beatles, and honestly thought himself to be the Beast 666 as prophesied by John the Divine in the Book of Revelation. An occultist, he was a painter, he was a mountaineer, and I think he was a double agent as well in the war. The Temple of Thelema. It's actually really dangerous to go in. I'm kind of reluctant, but...
There we go. How did you... Oh, he's in. Okay.
Okay. I'm already far too weirded out in here and it's horrible. It smells. And I feel it's a bit dangerous. Yeah, they've clearly closed it off for a reason.
This is a freaky place.
I mean, they wore robes, performed rituals. He offered a sort of what they called a libertine education for the children of his followers and allowed them to play all day and witness acts of sex magic. He also said, I slept with faith and found a corpse in my arms on awakening.
saw you walking down the street. I said that's the kind of gal I like to meet. She's so pretty, Lord, she's fine. I'm gonna make her mine, all mine. Hey, hey, baby.
On my pillow in the morning, lazy day in bed, music in my head, crazy music playing in the morning light. Roses are red in my lungs.
A long, long time ago, on graduation day, you handed me your book. I sang this way: roses are red, my love, violets are blue. Sugar is sweet, my love, but not as sweet as you. We dated through high school, and when the big day came, I wrote into your book next to my name. Roses are red, my love, violets are blue. Sugar is sweet, my love, but not as sweet as you.
It's odd because in Laurel Canyon, so many of the soon-to-be stars there, their parents were in either the military-industrial complex or intelligence or the Pentagon. In Frank Zappa's case, his dad was working at Edgewood Arsenal, where they were doing biochem studies, psychotropic, and exposing U.S. troops to VX nerve gas and other things. The family kept gas masks in their house. He grew up with that in case there was an accident. And Edgewood Arsenal was doing this very similar, related MK Ultra projects on U.S. troops. The Gulf of Tonkin is another prime example. The commander of the Gulf Fleet in the Gulf of Tonkin, his son was Jim Morrison. They claimed the USS Maddox was attacked by Vietnamese vessels. It was never attacked. As a matter of fact, they put ghost ships on the radar to make it look like they were Vietnamese ships. The Maddox was never attacked. It was an actual, literal false flag to enable the U.S. to declare war on Vietnam. So Jim Morrison's dad was involved in the false flag of the Gulf of Tonkin.
his deep involvement in personal use of drugs on himself and others, black magic.
When you say black magic, what are you talking about? I mean, some of the things that I read in the stack of material, it sounds just absolutely unbelievable. What are you talking about when you say this?
Well, the funny thing is that the actual truth is about as far out as Scientology itself. Really, the basis of Scientology, which is rather hidden and covered over, is the occult, the deep involvement with satanic powers. That he felt that he was deeply involved with a British black magician called Aleister Crowley, and through putting himself in deep hypnotic trances and the use of drugs on himself, he wanted to become the most powerful being in the world.
Did you consider all of this a religion?
Aleister Crowley, the late Aleister Crowley, my very good friend. He did himself a splendid piece of aesthetics built around those magic cults.
The pentagram. In the year of the primal force, in the dawn of terrestrial birth, man mastered the mammoth and horse, and man was the lord of the earth. He made him an hollow skin from the heart of unholy tree. He compassed the earth therein, and man was the lord of the sea. He controlled the vigorous steam. He harnessed the lightning for hire. He drove the celestial team, and man was the lord of the fire. Deep-mouthed from their thrones, deep-seated, the choirs of the eons declare the last of the demons defeated. For man is the lord of the air. Arise, O man, in thy strength. The kingdom is thine to inherit. But man is the lord of his spirit.
Every man is then shown to have been crucified, so don't think that it's an accident that the crucifixion, they found out that this applied. But since that time they have used it, and it became what is known as Christianity. The man on the cross. There was no Christ.
It believes only one thing. I am fixed in space by an exterior determinism. Now remember that. That's real important in the subject of exteriorization. This Satan is surrounded entirely by this complete belief that something else is fixing everything else in space, although we can't find any source of this, so we invent God.
The Pope of Scientology just beat the out of me.
My whole life, I was a very dedicated Scientologist.
David Miscavige, it's a hammer in my face.
I didn't want to find out what I'd done was a lie.
All the money we spent to try to hang on to my family, they've been owning me for all these years.
Something inside of me was saying, get them out of this thing. Fight for your family. Let's get to the abuses. Let's get to the abortions.
The point is not to be a victim, but to be a fighter.
It empowers people to see that people are actually coming forward.
There's momentum to expose Scientology. People continue to fight and they continue to speak out.
It's a matter of principle.
We were neglected and abused
It's just gonna get bigger and bigger and bigger. In season 1, we basically dealt with the effects of disconnection, and then in season 2, we wanted to show you a wide range of abusive policies in hopes that that would be enough for the authorities to step in, and that didn't happen. So in season 3, we thought, okay, let's just follow the money.
Scientology takes tax-free dollars and ruins people's lives.
Scientology continues to have tax-exempt status.
I am scared. I know how powerful that church is.
Scientology's hiring private investigators, threatening people, following them.
The difference between a religion and a cult is what happens when you try to leave.
Exposing abuses is one thing. Putting an end to them happens by governmental action.
Let's follow the money in hopes that something is going to take away this organization's ability to hurt bigger. I'm going to keep going until we see some justice. Wake up.
Wound up dying in Hastings in December 1st, 1947.
I have exposed myself to every form of disease, accident, and violence. I have driven myself to delight in dirty and disgusting debauches, and to devour human excrements and human flesh. I have mastered every mode of my mind, and made myself a morality more severe than any other in the world. 1,000 years from now, the world will be sitting in the sunset of Crowleyanity.
All these different artists you would not believe, one after another, that was influenced by Crowley. I mean, I can't think of any other occultist who's been more influential on rock musicians than Aleister Crowley. No one close. Crowley apparently influenced people from Adolf Hitler to Timothy Leary to Robert Anton Wilson to Harry Hay to L. Ron Hubbard.
Well, I've been an admirer of Aleister Crowley. I think that I'm carrying on much of the work that he started over 100 years ago, and I think the 60s themselves. You know, Crowley said, "Do what thou wilt, shall be the whole of the law."
Turn on, tune in, and drop out. We're turned on, and we're tuned in, and we're very dropped out. Turn on, tune in, and drop out.
Millions of dollars would be spent on LSD research at universities throughout the country, and word would begin to spread on campus about this so-called mind-blowing drug. And suddenly, it was the counterculture of the 60s.
I give the CIA a total credit for sponsoring and initiating the entire consciousness movement, counterculture events of the 1960s.
Crowley taught that his satanic doctrine should be cloaked under the lie of love, and he believed the youth would fall for it. The Beatles wrote the song Come Together as a campaign song for Leary's hopeful presidential bid that, thank God, never got off the ground.
The CIA funded and supported and encouraged hundreds of young psychiatrists to experiment with this drug.
And one of the men that he had influenced was Alfred Kinsey.
After publishing his male and female reports, Kinsey began to travel abroad and study sexuality in foreign countries.
Do you regard black magic as being purely fictitious, or is there some truth in it?
Some truth. 100% truth.
There is nothing fictitious about black magic, in any way whatever. It is a fact. It is a fact which has existed for several thousand years.
Today, Crowley's followers believe that he was a true prophet because he foresaw a society that has now embraced ideas of sexual and spiritual freedom. Crowley has become an icon of rebellion. The Rolling Stones, David Bowie, Led Zeppelin's Jimmy Page have all been influenced by his message of freedom.
Stairway was to have a piece of music, a composition, whereby it would just keep unfolding into more layers and more moods, and actually the whole intensity of or subtlety and the intensity of the overlay of the composition would actually accelerate as it went through on every level, every emotional level, every musical level, and so it just keeps opening up as it continues through its sort of passage.
There's a feeling I get when I look to the west, and my spirit is crying for me.
This was during the period that we were at Headley Grange that the thing was put together. It was slightly complicated to be doing this whole thing without a vocal, because at the time there weren't any lyrics, and this was the backbone of what the song was intended to be, and the whole of the running order from the beginning to the end was sort of mapped out. I remember during that period, Robert was sort of sitting down, leaning against the wall, and he was just sort of writing. I won't never forget that image of him doing that. We do a run-through of it from beginning to end with the guitar opening, as we all know. And then Robert comes up and starts to pitch in and sing. And I tell you, it must have been 90% of the lyrics were already done.
If there's a bustle in your hedgerow, don't be alone there.
And so everything is starting to open up on this map, on this journey through. And all of this stuff was planned, you know, it wasn't just an accident or everyone chipping in. It was just, it really was a sort of design. The whole thing would start to gain a momentum as it went through, so it wasn't just a monotone piece. And by that, I actually mean that it would subtly speed up, so you're breaking the #1 cardinal rule. It was a very inspired time for all of us at the time that we were living in the Headley Grange as a residence, eating, sleeping, making music. That's what we were doing day after day after day.
With Led Zeppelin, I've noticed their vehicles offer a lot of solace. As with any songs, you know, lyrics are meant to really touch people. It's very therapeutic. Lyrics help people deal with very real and tough, hard problems in life that we would otherwise go through alone.
First of all, before we go do it backwards and before we show the bootleg, I want to open it up, and I want to show you what it looks like on the inside of Stairway to Heaven. And what you see is a woman, and she's climbing a mountain. Does it look like it leads to heaven? Looks like it leads to outer darkness to me. What kind of music do you hear? The lyric forward often has everything to do with the lyric backwards. Forward. Your stairway lies on the whispering wind. Forward it says, and your stairway lies on the whispering wind. Backwards it says, 'cause I live with Satan. Listen carefully. Raise your hand if you heard anything right away. Her stairway lies in the whispering wind, dear lady, just like the Led Zeppelin fans, because their power is Satan. They live with Satan. That's who empowers them, and they're following Led Zeppelin. They're really following Satan. Backwards it says, the Lord turned me off. You'd have to turn your ears off to not hear it, okay? It's really obvious what's going on here. Just listen, and I'm going to ask you to raise your hand if you heard something before I even say anything. Raise your hands if you heard anything. Backwards, they lift up, the demons lift up, because this isn't Led Zeppelin, this is Spiritism, and Spirit's working through Robert Plant.
I remember during that period, Robert was sort of sitting down, leaning against the wall, and he was just sort of writing. I will never forget that image of him doing that. And Robert comes up and starts to pitch in and sing, and I tell you, it must have been 90% of the lyrics were already done.
This is Spiritism, and Spirit's working through Robert Plant.
It must have been 90% of the lyrics were already done.
It was a very inspired time for all of us at the time that we were living in the Headley Grange as a residence, eating, sleeping, making music. That's what we were doing.
What's this? You seen this? Abby used to do this sometimes. Write things backwards. And that last number.
Backwards, they lift up, the demons lift up, because this isn't Led Zeppelin, this is Spiritism.
You worth
It says, here's to my sweet Satan.
I don't think it's freaky at all. I don't think it's some supernatural devil thing. It's just a coincidence. It has to be, right?
Not much into my albums anymore, so. He will give you 666. Big deal. The mark of the beast will come out. People will take it on their right hand or their forehead. Led Zeppelin were just 4 puppets. Satan could have used any 4 and formed Led Zeppelin. It was Satan's music.
It's not Satan's music. It is not Satan's music. Totally BS. It is the music of John Paul Jones, John Bonham, Robert Plant, and Jimmy Page. They're not Satan. Look at Jimmy Page from way back then. Look how peng he was. You think that's Satan? No way. Or how about Robert Plant?
obviously Led Zeppelin are pretty renowned in rock fans' minds as people who've got a hand in the occult. So in '69, 2 years after Pepper, Zeppelin arrive on the scene, of course, and guitarist Jimmy Page dives heavily into Crowley. He's bought relics, you know, he's doing spells. He apparently opened a bookstore called the Equinox, which is an occult bookstore named after one of Crowley's books. So he apparently also tries to get the whole band to do this particular incantation and ritual at the start of the career. Only one of them says no, and we'll come back to that later. But when he used his earnings to buy loads of Crowley's old stuff, he also bought Boleskine House in 1970, which, as we discovered earlier, was the house he bought on Loch Ness to do with spells. Now, he owned it for 22 years, but only lived in it 6 weeks. Now, we don't know whether that's down to he didn't like it in there or whether he was, you know, he's Jimmy Page, so he's on tour all the time.
Right, right.
But he was quite overt with his occult interest, Jimmy Page. It's not like with what we just discussed with the Beatles, where you have to look at clues. Like, he's quite outward with it. Now, Led Zeppelin 3, the album, in the outro groove, is actually carved, "Do What Thou Wilt." And that's that he carved it onto the original press that all the other presses were made from. And on the other side, he carved "So Mote It Be." Now, that saying, "So Mote It Be," interestingly, is often said at the end of spells in witchcraft. So you'll do your spell and you'll end up with "So Mote It Be." Now, people have said it's interesting what Jimmy Page could have been doing there, because if you think about like how concentration and will is meant to work with spells and black magic, and at some point when they release Led Zeppelin 3, Jimmy Page will be fully aware that there's going to be millions of records all spinning at the same time with "Do What Thou Wilt" and "So Mote It Be" on the back.
Well, yeah, and that's the thing too. When you talk about the whole, you know, as time goes by, I always say this: you forget, like, okay, well, you know, there's really no crazy rock and roll bands right now, but Guns N' Roses was so nuts, and then you go back, well, the Stones were so nuts, but when you get into the real nitty gritty of it, Led Zeppelin was kind of the original, just completely insane rock and roll band. So amongst all the other crazy things they did, once again, the fact that Jimmy Page lived in this mansion on the hills of Loch Ness that was owned by Aleister Crowley, it's, of course he did. Why wouldn't you? But the fact that he only lived there for 6 weeks, you start to wonder, I wonder why. I wonder why that is.
There's a cool thing with Jimmy Page as well. He met Kenneth Anger at the auction house Sotheby's to try and buy some, when they were competing with each other to buy some Crowley memorabilia. And Kenneth Anger's like an occult film director and a big follower of Crowley. And he was making a film at the time called Lucifer Rising, which was an occult film. Now, they started to have problems with the film itself during filming, and his lead actor, Bobby Buziol, I think it's pronounced, or Buziol, he ran off with some of the film and some of the equipment and said that he'd buried it in the desert and would only give it back to Kenneth Anger if Anger paid his friend this massive amount of money. Now, Kenneth Anger refused, and instead, he cursed the guy. Now, 1 year on, this guy was jailed for life for murder because his friend who took the film and buried it was Charles Manson.
Yeah, I know where you're going with that. Bobby Beausoleil.
Beausoleil, that's his name.
He was one of the Manson family. I didn't realize he was an actor.
Exactly. I didn't until researching this. And Manson's popping back up again, which is another weird thing.
Sharon Tate LaBianca's murder, okay, was a witch's hitting. Sharon Tate wanted out, but the thing is, the Illuminati...
What do you mean she wanted out? She was a witch?
Yes, she was tired of it. She wanted to get out, but
Sharon
the thing
Tate
is...
was a witch, okay.
Oh, but the thing is...
You base those allegations on what?
On when I was in, myself. I'm not the only one who knows this information. Anybody who was in witchcraft during that time can tell you the same thing. What happened was...
That Sharon Tate was a practicing witch?
Yes.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, the Illuminati...
I have no information to refute it, so I'm only going on what you're saying.
The Illuminati sent Charles Manson in to kill her. If you remember, she was killed. One leg was strung up from laughter, her hands behind her, her throat sliced open. There was a tarot, 78 cards and a tarot deck.
You look at the 12th major arcana one, it looks like the Hanged Man. That's exactly how Sharon Tate LaBianca was left. Charles Manson did not go into prison. He volunteered to go in.
I was living in the Haight-Ashbury in the old Russian embassy on Fulton Street, and a concert was announced of a group called Love. I think it was 1964, and I went to the concert and saw Bobby, and he was playing guitar, and I was looking for a young man to portray Lucifer in my first version of Lucifer Rising. He turned out to be a Scorpio, which didn't surprise me, since I'm Scorpio Rising.
A demon is just a convenient way of labeling a force. The demons I'm working with in Lucifer are what magicians call elementals. In other words, these are individuals, they're people, they have 3 dimensions, but their main driving force is demonic. They answer another call.
Lucifer, to him, the bringer of light, which is kind of a personal thing for him because he saw himself as a filmmaker, as a bringer of light, you know, communicating with light.
I've always felt comfortable with Lucifer. I have his name on my chest, but that preceded Bobby. It had nothing to do with Bobby. It was just it's my personal logo. It's not the devil. It's the fallen angel that is so beautiful and so charismatic that God kicked him out of heaven. That's the fall of Lucifer. He was like almost like a young Mick Jagger or something in a rock scene.
On a concert, the Magic Powerhouse of Oz, and this was going to be at the Straight Satan Theater. And Kenneth got in on it. He wanted to turn it into Equinox Festival. You know, he was going to do an invocation to Lucifer on the dance floor, which would be used as an extension of the stage. So we played a first set. It went real well. And then during the break, after the first set, Kenneth was going to do his invocation. He had set it up to do it to a recording. He'd gone to a recording studio and recorded this invocation, and then he was going to sort of pantomime the invocation. Well, he took acid that night, and I think it would have gone okay, possibly, even so, had the tape that he'd recorded not broken in the middle of his presentation. It freaked him out, and things just started happening. This sort of calamity that happens around him when he freaks out, when he goes on that, and things around him just sort of cooperate with him synchronously. Mechanical or electrical things were happening that he was not touching or doing anything to. Lights were exploding. I mean, you know, it just started falling apart. Went up on stage and tore holes in the scrim, looking, you know, calling my name, looking for me. And well, that was pretty much the end of our relationship at that point.
Like the Sorcerer's Apprentice, I mean, it spun out of control. He kicked the front door open and went into my studio and helped himself to all the cans that said Bobby on them. So he had the film. He drove it to Southern California, and it broke down on the edge of San Fernando Valley in front of the Span Ranch. And some of the girls came out and asked him to move in. And he got ensnared in the Manson family quagmire. And I was quite irritated with him. I did put the curse of the toad on him. Well, there's this fairy tale about the Frog Prince, about the toad that is in the well. And so you sort of identify the person with the toad in the well, and then they can't get out.
Page stepped in and said he'd do the soundtrack, but it soured over time and Page pulled out, leading to Kenneth Anger, true to form and true to his name, to get angry and cursed him. Now, this curse, he went on record to say he's pulled off this massive curse and, you know, they should be in fear of their lives. And you could argue, all right, curses don't exist. It's all about what you believe and whether you believe it or not is how much effect it'll have. But over the next 5 years, Robert Plant had a car crash in Greece, nearly died. Because of that, he had to cancel the rest of the tour. He had to record the next album in a wheelchair. John Bonham and his manager, Peter Grant, nearly beat a guy to death just about to escape jail. Then, obviously, Plant's son, Karak, got sick and died. Doctors didn't know what was wrong with him at the time. And he died just age 5. And then Plant left the band because Page and Jones didn't go to the funeral. And then John Bonham goes to bed steaming drunk in 1980 and dies in his sleep. During this time, Page is obviously absolutely comatose with a heroin addiction as well. So within those 5 years, the alleged curse had hit every single member except for John Paul Jones, who back at the start of Led Zeppelin didn't take part in that ritual that Jimmy Page wanted them to do.
Wow.
The queen of lying took her bow, and then she turned to go.
It's played out any road, isn't it? You know, Rings.
Very nice.
It's yours.
Nah, no good to me, mate. My missus won't wear a ring like that. Ostentatious, that is.
He's from the West.
Nah, East. Stepney.
Does this ring mean anything to you?
Freemason?
Do you mean you're all English?
Certainly. What are unions for? Oh, wait a minute, I'll tell a lie. We have got one in there from the Mystic East.
Here comes the sun, doo-doo-doo. Here comes the sun. I say it's alright. Little darling, it's been a long, cold, lonely
Number nine.
The first meeting we talk about in the story is a meeting between Paul McCartney and Luciano Berio that happened in Italy, I think in 1967. What Berio was doing at that time that Paul McCartney was so interested in is making music with tape, using tape machines to record sounds and then putting them together. Paul McCartney went out and bought the same tape recorders that Berio was using, and they began making this sort of music. And they did experiments with it, and that sort of culminated in Revolution 9. It's a song that people who know the Beatles casually may not be aware of, and people who are real Beatles fans, I mean, it's such an enigma. It's such an unusual piece for them. There really was no better way than Revolution 9 to demonstrate how far out the Beatles were going in music that was never meant to be played by people, music that exists only on tape or only in a computer or only on a CD, and have tried to figure out ways of making that music happen live. You're not creating orchestral sounds, you're creating sounds that have nothing to do sometimes with what our instruments were designed to do.
It's just a song, right? It's just music. It's only a band. I mean, some of the music I listen to, I don't even pay attention to the lyrics half the time because I don't understand them.
You want to keep an eye on who's writing the children's books, and you know, you see a lot of celebrities writing children's books. I'm not going to name any names, but you can go and look around and find that well, I name one. Madonna has written a number of children's books. There are others too. Like, it's out there pretty much that Madonna is a high priestess, and it's very clear if you watch any of her number of her performances. at any of the big shows that she's doing ritualistic work. She's doing that.
Everybody comes to Hollywood. They wanna make it in the neighborhood. They like the smell of it in Hollywood. How could it hurt you when it looks so good? Every time they turn the lights down, just wanna go that extra mile for you. Public display of affection, feels like no one else in the room. I know I may be young, but I've got feelings too, and I need to do what I feel like doing. So let me go and just listen. All you people look at me like I'm a little girl. Well, did you ever think it'd be okay for me to step into this world? Always saying, little girl, don't step into the club. Well, I'm just trying to find out why, 'cause dancing's what I love. Yeah. Get it, get it, get it, get it. Get it, get it, get it, get it.
Still my belly make for love PPR. Nasıl saçını Work metals
Piece of me, you want a piece of me. You want a piece of me. I'm Mrs. Lifestyle, rich and famous. You want a piece of me. I'm Mrs. Oh my God, that Britney shameless. You want a piece of me. Mrs. Extra, extra skin. You want a piece of me. Mrs. She's too big, now she's too thin. You want a piece of me, piece of me, me. You want a piece of me. In the sea.
Experimentation into the occult went far beyond Crowley's formal Golden Dawn grades, incorporating the use of mind-altering.
To really appreciate how this could be done, you need to appreciate something called trauma-based mind control. During the last war in the concentration camps of Germany, they started to perfect the manipulation of a natural mechanism in the mind that shuts out trauma. If you could systematically traumatize someone and start with children, particularly before the age of 5 and 6, you could turn their minds into a honeycomb of self-contained compartments, none of which was aware of the other's existence.
We've got these list of Mouseketeers. We've got Britney Spears, Christina Aguilera, Justin Timberlake.
These were all poor little children that were brainwashed together in a Disney program.
What they will do is use these people in high-profile rituals.
Britney Spears created quite a commotion here at this tattoo parlor in Sherman Oaks tonight when she showed up, well, let's just say with a whole new look that may not be so popular with her fans.
They aren't just pop stars trying to cry out for attention. These are people that have been put through abuse throughout their lives and raised in this environment that we can't even imagine.
I was verbally, mentally, and physically abused on a daily basis. I was cut off from the outside world and stripped of all of my human rights. Every time I would use the bathroom or take a shower, it was monitored. As a child, I felt their piercing eyes staring at my naked body. I was just a kid and felt violated every single day. Children were restrained, hit, thrown into walls, strangled, and sexually abused regularly at Provo.
Every breath you take, every move you make, every bond you break, every step you take, I'll be watching you. Every single day, every word you say. Stay, I'll be watching you. Oh, can't you see? You belong to me, and my poor heart aches with every step you take, every move. gone and lost without a trace. I dream at night, I can only see your face. I look around, but it's you I can't replace. I feel so cold and I long for your embrace. I keep crying, baby, baby, please.
The troubled sister of Mariah Carey has filed a summons with notice claiming her mother as a defendant, claiming she was sexually assaulted as a child, causing her to misuse drugs to suppress the horrific memories. Allison Carey, 57, has accused her mom, Patricia, of allowing and encouraging adult men to engage in sexual acts when she was just 10 years old in a document filed in February. According to the summons with notice filed in the New York Supreme Court and seen by DailyMail.com, Allison alleges that as well as enduring her own abuse, she was also forced to watch other youngsters being abused during middle-of-the-night satanic worship meetings that included ritual sacrifices. She's estranged from her superstar sister and their mother, an Irish-American former singer with the Metropolitan Opera. In the document, she says her mother allowed the men to engage in sexual acts, including forcible touching and sexual assault in the first degree. In the summons, Allison claims that as a result of what she witnessed and endured, she has been diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, and depression, which in turn put her on a downward spiral of drug abuse in an attempt to suppress the horrific memories. In a previous interview, in 2018, Allison Carey claimed that a family member used to take her to occult gatherings in the early hours of the morning where she was abused by cloaked worshippers.
There was a close family member involved in a satanic cult. Used to force me to attend certain rituals. There were a lot of things that I witnessed that, you know, were like secrets that you wish you didn't have to hold on to. People would be wearing black robes with hoods, you know, so you couldn't see their faces. And they'd be walking in a line, chanting the usual things that satanic cults do, like drink blood. They do that. I did suffer sexual abuse during those rituals. Some of those satanic holidays, they always will be involved with sexual abuse with children, forcing children to have sex with adults, adults having sex with other adults. There's all kinds of stuff going on that really shouldn't be, and it shouldn't be something that children are forced to watch. You know, it can screw up a child for their whole life. When Mariah was in any danger, when she was a child, when there was something going on where she could have been harmed, I did whatever I could do to protect her. You know, Mariah was 3 years old, and I was 11, and I was threatened, you know, if you don't do this, what we're telling you to do, we're gonna kill your sister, you know. When you're given that type of a threat, it's almost impossible to ignore what you're being told.
Yeah.
Mariah, I know that you've gone through a tremendous amount of pain and difficulty. And sometimes it's as though, I know sometimes you feel as though what you're remembering didn't really happen, you know. I just want you to know that if there was ever any way that you needed help from me, just pick up the phone and call me. And I would always be there for you. You know, I know that you didn't want to hear any of the things that I had to say, but just this one thing, you know, I get the sense that you're really going through a lot, just in your head, what you're going through and some of the things that you're doing. And I understand why, even if you don't. All right, and I would help you if you'll let me.
Although Allison never saw Mariah at the gatherings, she fears she may have been a victim too, after their brother Morgan also confirmed he was taken to the occult group as a child. Quote, "It sounds hard to believe, and I have so many memories I wish I never had," she said. A close family member used to wake me up just before 2 a.m. and take me to an old hall that looked like a castle, which was a short walk from the church we used to attend in Huntington, New York. The place is still there. I could show you exactly where it is. The ceremonies or rituals were always between 2 and 4 a.m., and they weren't every week, as far as I can remember, just certain dates. Everyone would wear long robes with black hoods and walk in twos across to this place. Inside, they would start the rituals, and they would be chanting in another language, I think Latin. I never understood what was going on. I remember there was some kind of table or altar, and they would chant, and everyone would stand in a circle. There would be around 20 people there, including children. Then, terrible things would happen. I think I was about 6 when I first remember going there, and it went on for a few years. I never heard them say the word Satan, but the whole thing was so evil and wrong. I'm sure they were Satan worshippers, or Luciferians. It was terrifying, something that stayed with me my whole life. I don't remember ever seeing Mariah, because she was a lot younger than me, but that's not to say she wasn't there. It's impossible to say. Another time, Allison, who has been estranged from her superstar singer sister for several years, had to climb out of a window with 3-year-old Mariah after another family member tried to burn their house down. Some people may say she can't be trusted because she's a drug addict, but as a recovering addict myself, I realize that the drugs aren't the problem. They're a symptom of the problem.
Every move you make, every vow you break, every smile you fake, every claim you stake, I'll be watching you.
Hello, I'm 7-year-old Jimmy Lovato.
Demi is very good at hiding what she needs to hide.
It was hammered into her head. You have to be this icon.
Taking hold of that power.
I'm rebirthing. I'm rebirthing.
I'm rebirthing.
Trauma. If you could systematically traumatize someone and start with children could turn their minds into a honeycomb of self-contained compartments, none of which was aware of the other's existence.
The devil.
In this music video by Miley Cyrus for her song Baby Talk, Miley is dressed up in a baby outfit and does all sorts of seductive poses. Think about that for a second. A baby is doing seductive sexy dancing. And to make matters worse, one of the lyrics of the song is "Fuck me so you stop baby talking." Now the song itself is about Miley being fed up with her boyfriend doing baby talk, but the music video adds a whole nother really messed up context. We essentially have a baby telling a grown man to fuck her. The only kind of people I can imagine enjoying something like this are pedophiles.
At least not today, not today, not today.
There's something wrong with the world. You don't know what it is, but it's there, like a splinter in your mind. Try it.
has just been accused of casting spells and using dark magic on her former bandmate.
I don't want anything to do with this person, like, at all. I've said that for a very long time.
So this woman used to work as a drummer for Beyonce. Her name is Kimberly Thompson, and she played music with the megastar for 7 years. The woman seems thoroughly convinced that Beyonce practiced extreme witchcraft and dark magic to torment her.
And the entire time, this person was casting spells and manipulating me and controlling my job situations, my relationships.
This woman alleges that she cast magic spells of sexual molestation on her. She also claims that Beyonce murdered her kitten.
What happened with your cat? What happened with this, she cast spells? What exactly happened there?
The cat started doing weird magical stuff. Like I'm telling the person, the nurse, like, hey, I don't want this kitty. Please take it back. It's being weird. The cat it had its own personality. It stuck its hand out and grabbed my finger, type of weird, crazy shit. We're talking about like other situations where changing into animals and jumping into other bodies and all kinds of really crazy stuff. So the fact that people keep saying I'm crazy, hell, the situations I had to deal with and survive are crazy.
New York City. As a longtime real estate executive for Cushman & Wakefield, Glenn had the foresight years ago to know what Brooklyn could become, and he played an important role in the renaissance of our thriving world. In addition, Glenn was a key player in helping to found the team's future HSS Training Center location in Sunset Park, Brooklyn. Glenn also gives back to the community as the founder of Brooklyn 1834, which provides a forum for the world's up-and-coming artists. Due to illness, Glenn could not be here tonight. He's fighting his illness with the same determination that he's used to make Brooklyn a better place. Glenn is represented tonight by solutions and the Nets, and showed appreciation for Glenn's leadership and his contribution in making Brooklyn what it is today.
My wild love went riding. She rode all the day. She rode to the devil. Asked him to pay. My wild love went riding. She went to the sea. She went to the devil. Here it comes, another lonely day. Playing the game, I'll sail away on a voyage of no return to sea. If the turn of life is meant to be.
He will give you 666. Big deal. The mark of the beast will come out. People will take it on their right hand or their forehead.
It's just a song, right? It's just music. It's only a band. I mean, some of the music I listen to, I don't even pay attention to the lyrics half the time because I don't understand them.
They'll always tell you in one way or another what they're doing or how they're going to do it, because there's that's part of the contract as well. It's part of the thing. If they tell you what they're doing and you're not smart enough to pick it up, then they can get away with it karmically.
Most people still today think that all entertainment is therefore nothing more than entertainment. And it never ever was that case.
They've been programmed. And I'm sad because I know that it's hard for people like that to take a serious interest in world affairs. I see how easy it is for the masses to be manipulated.
It's a psychic weapon to blind people from all the majesty and beauty that is creation, and to blind people from their families and their children and just the amazing life force that's all around us.
I found God because I realized that the Luciferian and the other side, the occult world, was real, and that I had been fooled for all these years, and I then got really scared.
The scale and fine detail in which these opinion formers right across society, from entertainment, media, through to politics, etc., are actually brought through from childhood to do those things is absolutely incredible. And when the lid really comes off this, and it's coming off, then people are going to look at the world they've been living in and see just, even if people now think, yes, it's a controlled world, whoa, wait till you see the level of control.
You just blindly saw yourself. You just blindly saw yourself. You just blindly saw yourself.
Robert Johnson is considered one of the greatest blues artists of all time.
It's the template for what became rock and roll. I believe Robert Johnson was extremely talented, extremely gifted, and way off balance. Something's spinning strangely in that man's life. Robert was a novice guitar player, not very good.
This man was a nobody.
And then he disappears.
A year and a half later, he's doing things with the guitar that even his mentors can't do.
How could Robert possibly have gotten that good that fast?
The myth goes, Robert went to the crossroads, got down on his knees, handed his guitar to the devil. The devil said, once you receive the guitar back, your soul is mine.
If you do make a deal with the devil, you're gonna have to pay the price.
It ended up costing him, the bill coming due.
He let his arrogance go too far.
We all have to choose how much we can sacrifice in order to achieve greatness.
It is the task of the enlightened not only to ascend to learning and to see the good, but to be willing to descend again to those prisoners and to share their troubles and their honors, whether they are worth having or not. And this they must do, even with the prospect of death. They shall give of their help to one another, wherever each class is able to help the community.